Our next speaker worked as a Queensland police officer for 22 years, and 16 of those was as a detective. In his last 5 years of service, he was a specialist in cyber safety. He has worked with the FBI, Homeland Security, and with a task force in San Jose. Brett has received 2 Police Commissioners Awards for his contribution to developing software to help keep children safe when using the internet. Brett has created an Internet Safety Schools program that has already reached over 100,000 students, parents and teachers. He is passionate about education and passionate about the safety of young people. Young leaders, would you please welcome Brett Lee.
Thank you. Now, I do a lot of work in schools, and we were adding it up the other day, and I've done about 3,000 presentations in the last 5 years to guys just like yourself. And of course, secondary school students, because some of them have a few issues on the internet as well. So I have done 3,000 presentations in the last 5 years, but this is the largest audience I've ever spoken to. So you, I think, should give yourself a hand becoming part of my history as being the largest group that I've ever spoken to. Now, my messages generally, when I speak, is not to discourage anybody, young people, young adults, or adults in using technology, because I think it's an amazing invention, it's an amazing resource, and it can just offer us so much, and it's always going to be a very big part of our world. But today I want to go through a little bit of my background, and I want to show you how that can be related to the people that we can be on the internet. I do want to talk about online leaders and online leadership. Now, I think it's really important that you fully know my background. A little bit of it was highlighted at the start. But I want to show you some pictures just to show you that it's not just words, that it is true. I am from Queensland, so I do apologise if I talk a little bit slow. I'll try and talk fast so I can talk like someone from New South Wales or Victoria. And my background is in law enforcement. I spent 22 years in the Queensland Police, as was highlighted. As you can see, I used to be a lot younger than what I am now. Obviously, that photo was taken about 12 months ago. And for most of my time, I was a detective. Now, I was involved in many different forms of investigation, from shoplifting up to murder, and I actually got the opportunity to arrest people for those offences. But for most of my time, it was my job to investigate adult people, 17 years and above. In the eyes of the law, our community says that people who are 17 years and above are classed as adults, and people 16 years and below are classed as children. Now, that would cover the definition of children would cover most of the people in this audience. Now, that is not a bad thing. That just means while we're growing, while we're learning, we have some extra things put in place to protect us. We have rules, we have responsibilities ourselves as young people, and those things are put in place so we can avoid some of the bad stuff that I suppose may be out in the real world. We've been taught about those things ever since we could walk or talk. I was when I was growing up, and that's what I did with my children. And you know, I've got 4 kids, and 2 of them are younger, and I really encourage them to become part of that cyber world. Do you know the cyber world or the internet's never hurt anybody? It's really how people use it that cause the issues. So if we're going to be part of that world, we have to appreciate that, I suppose, not everything on the internet is wonderful. We have to know that it's like the real world, that there could be dangers there, we could have responsibilities. I believe that simply because you're sitting in this auditorium tonight, you have been recognised and you already possess the skills that you need to be a leader on the internet. It's about taking all those qualities that have been identified in you into how you operate in the real world and applying them to the cyber world. So I don't believe there's anything that you would need to learn to know how to take all those qualities and the things that you're doing in the real world and apply them to the internet. So that's a bit of my background there. I don't do that anymore. I am involved in education. Now, after I left the police, I was actually very fortunate. I got the opportunity to go over to a country called Iraq, where I worked for the United States government over there, training Iraqi men how to be police officers. So I was a teacher over there. I worked at the Iraq National Police Academy. And you know what I liken it to? My first day in Iraq. We landed at about 11 o'clock at night. And I was told before I went over there that planes weren't allowed to land during the night because it was too dangerous. But because there was a hold-up at the Dubai airport, they said, you've got to go late. So I was nervous right from the start. And I can remember the very first time I flew into the capital, Baghdad, I felt like I was at my first day of primary school. I knew nobody, I was scared, I had no idea where to go. I knew that if I went to the wrong place, I could get into a lot of trouble because there's a bit of a war, a bit of a conflict going on in that country. So I have a policing background, not a military background, and I would train people. That's one of the, that's my bedroom there. I mean, most people don't have a machine gun and a Glock pistol beside their bed at night, so it was a totally different world for me. And I did feel, again, that I had to learn. But I noticed a couple of interesting things in my time over there. It took me about 2 weeks to really feel comfortable in this foreign country and in a foreign environment. And I found that other men like myself, a lot of them ex-police officers, some of them ex-military, were coming over and working for us as well, that they were looking to me for answers. So it wasn't so much the environment that I was in, it's the qualities that I had already developed as a result of being part of the community that we live in. And I know this is a fact, that all you guys sitting here, that you have developed multiple qualities that are essential for leaders and you probably don't even know it. And they will come to the fore when, I suppose, those responsibilities are placed upon you. You will be able to handle it. And so what I really encourage you to do is take those challenges at school, to think outside the square, to know that when you're making those good choices, when you're putting yourself forward, that you're helping us and you're developing yourself when it comes to leadership. So it's a very hard thing to define, I believe, leadership. It's what's within inside us. And I believe everyone here, if you choose, you can be a leader, not only in the real world, but transfer those qualities to the internet. Now, we know how to operate in that real world very, very well. We know what's expected of us. We know what's expected of other people. We know right from wrong. We know the things that we can do in the real world that could make others look up to us. All we have to do is be the true reflection on the internet as to the person we are in the real world. And you'll be very, very surprised, because a lot of people feel that the internet is this different, I suppose it's a different world. I have my cyber world and I have my physical world. You know why these two worlds aren't the same? And if you can always remember this, you are miles ahead of 95% of adults who are walking around in our community. If you can always believe, even though this feels like a different world, the internet and the cyber world, I'm in a world as real as the physical world because I'm dealing with the same people. So that just makes sense to me, that if I can just make the same choices online, if I can be my own man, my own woman, make choices based on what I believe is right, and work within those boundaries, I'm going to have an awesome experience on the internet. Because from my experience, like the real world guys, you've seen it. People who make bad choices are the ones that put themselves in a position where they will face issues. The internet's exactly the same. So you can take those messages back to your school and say, you know what, when you look at that screen, you feel like you're in a different place, but you're not. So we can condition ourselves as leaders, and people will see that online. If you do the right thing on the internet and follow the rules, people aren't going to not want to have anything to do with you. They're going to embrace you online. They will respect you for making those choices. You know what's the right thing to say. You know what we shouldn't say. So what we do, we be that same person on the internet. So even though that was a very scary experience over there, I learned a lot. Those leadership skills or qualities that I had developed just by being a part of our society really shone through. So you may feel, I can't do that. They've asked me to speak at school up on a stage. I can't do that. I can guarantee you it's within you to do it. You need to push yourself forward. So, look, some of my time over there, another very important thing I learned, this is why I know you've got those qualities, because I learnt a lot when I was in Iraq, even though I was supposed to be teaching these guys. One thing I learnt was this. One of my classes, adult men, who were Iraqi citizens who I was teaching to be police officers. That's one of their leaders there. Some of my students could not even read and write their own language. Now, this isn't because they weren't intelligent. This isn't because they didn't want to learn. This isn't because they don't want a life the same as we have in our society, want the best for their family. It's because they never got the opportunity to go to a school. And that's how I know you've already developed a lot of skills when it comes to leadership. Some of my adult students couldn't even put themselves in a straight line. And it wasn't because that they weren't intelligent or they didn't want to, they just didn't know how. You are learning some incredibly valuable skills just by going to school. I look out here and I see that virtually every single student here in some form or another is wearing a uniform. You are learning something by doing that. You're learning to be part of a team. You're learning to fall within, you're learning rules and boundaries. And I know why you would wear a school uniform to school. I mean, you don't have to wear the uniform. You could change halfway to school, but you don't. Why? Because you just do that. It's one of the rules. Everybody does it. And I don't want to get myself into trouble, and I'll be embarrassed because I'll be the only one. So you're making these good choices every day of the week, and you're learning these qualities. A lot of my students didn't have any independent thinking or decision-making skills. So we need to exercise those things every chance that we get at school. There's programs that you as the school leaders can run within your school when it comes to cyber safety. You can develop your own programs. Get up and do a presentation to the younger students. You know what? They prefer to hear from you when it comes to technology than they would prefer to hear from me. So we can take that back to our schools. We can show them our leadership qualities. We can become educators. What a great way to, I suppose, to exhibit our skills and to develop those skills. You know, when I did my first presentation, I was nervous, I stuttered, I didn't know what slide was coming up next. You know, the only thing that I suppose helps me speak to large audiences now is practice. The fact that I put myself in that position, I was very uncomfortable. Sometimes when, I suppose, when we want to be leaders, we want to put ourselves out there, you may feel very uncomfortable, but that's a good thing. So put yourself out there. You do have those qualities. So I'll just go through some of these pictures, some of the other pictures. That's one of my classes there. Now my classes, they're allowed to bring their machine guns to class, but even these guys had rules. They weren't allowed to have them loaded. They had to leave their ammunition outside in their bags because we did have an accident where someone shot a hole through the roof. But you know what? These guys from Iraq that I instructed, absolutely amazing people, an amazing country. It was fantastic, and a lot of those guys are still, a lot of those guys there are still my close friend when it comes to, you know, interacting with them on the internet. Fantastic people. Children as young as 9 and 10 working full time, they will never have the opportunity to go to school and develop those qualities. They're digging ditches from sun up to sundown at 9, 10, 11 years of age. So we are very fortunate. We must embrace what we've got. I've got a boy that's just left year 12 and he had enough of school. But you know what? I know in a couple of years when he's 19, 20, 21, 22, he's going to look back and say, hey, that was a really important time. That was a great time. I wish I had embraced it a little bit more. You can realise that now. That even though we don't like getting up, going to school, but we're learning some incredibly valuable lessons. So I'll just finish putting these photos out here. That's one of my classes there. So we'd do a bit of classroom work, then we'd go, like you'd go out onto the oval to do some exercise. We'd go to that city in the background there that was abandoned to do some training. So I was, you know what, I look at myself, people say, oh, that must have been a terrible time over there. I look at myself as being very fortunate. It really expanded my mind. So those I suppose those opportunities that you're given, it's very important you take them. It won't always feel right. You will feel nervous. Hey, do you know what I know by standing up on stage? That you can be your own worst enemy. I think everyone's looking at me. Everyone's going to judge. Everyone's going to think what I'm saying is funny. People don't do that. When they're in the audience, they're just looking at you and, I suppose, taking in what you're saying. So I would suggest that you do get out there and, you know, take those opportunities. Already mentioned, I did have a chance to work for the FBI over in the United States, the Department of Homeland Security, also the San Jose Police in California, the Dallas Police in Texas at their Internet Crimes Against Children Task Force. But this is really the main reason that I pass messages on to young people. I know you can be a leader on the internet. And you know how I know that? You know how I know when you make good decisions, you're going to be respected online? It's because for 5 years as a detective, it was my job to be you on the internet. It was my job to pretend to be a young boy or a young girl on the internet as a detective to look for some of those, I suppose, those people who, I suppose, don't think the same as us and our teachers and our family. They're there to harm others. So I know what it's like as a young person to interact online. And I just want to finish with this one thing, I suppose. I've only got about 3 minutes left. I was asked a very intelligent question about 5 years ago by a Year 7 student. And they said to me, hey, when you were ever pretending to be a kid on the internet, were you ever cyberbullied? And I said, you know what, I'd never thought about it. I'd never thought about it. And I thought back to a very particular time when I was a police officer and I just started doing this undercover work. And not many police in Australia were doing it. So the police department itself didn't know a lot about it. So they just put us on the internet, we got a bit of training, and then we started doing these investigations. I used to pretend to be a young person. So, I've spent thousands and thousands of hours pretending to be a student in year 6 or 7, or 5 or 6 or 7, in places like, public communication forums, chat rooms, instant messaging programs, those great gaming sites you guys love. WoW, COD, RuneScape, Mushing Monsters, Club Penguin, my favourite game of all time. Going down the mine in the cart's my favourite game. But also those social networking sites that I had when I pretended to be a teenager, like Facebook, MySpace, Bebo, Tag, Twitter, Habbo, Flickr, and whatever else comes along in the future. And you know what? I thought back, and right at the start when I started doing it, there was a period over a couple of months where I recall back where I was feeling a lot of anger and frustration within inside myself, and I didn't know why. And I was exhibiting that at work. I was getting very angry and aggressive with my bosses at work, and I got into a bit of trouble. And I was expressing that towards my family as well. And the police then sent me off to speak to a doctor to make sure that, to find out what's going on, why this change of mood. And we found out that it was being exposed to all that negative content on the internet was changing me as a person. It was having a negative effect on me. Some of it wasn't directed at me, but every time I'd go online, I'd see people were being nasty. They were, putting me down, and they were threatening me and things like that. And that's only a very small part of the internet. Most people are like you. People make good choices online, or the internet wouldn't work at all. So we found out that me being exposed to that changed me as a person. Now, you know what, guys? I was an adult man pretending to be a young person, but it still had a negative effect on me. The police now will only let you look at the screen for 2 hours, and you've got to have another police officer sitting beside you, so you've got someone there for support. So please don't feel that if you're ever using technology, that if you're feeling those negative emotions, that there's something wrong with you. You can be a leader online. You make your own choices. If people are exposing you to things that are that are negative online, you make a choice. You move from that program. You shut things down. The way you become a leader online is to be a true reflection on the internet. Make the same choices that you make in the real world. If you're ever unsure, you talk to people in the real world. Or what we do is think, and I know you may have heard this before, but these messages will never change. If I was on the internet and a person I respected from the real world, like my grandparents, my carer, a teacher that I trust, if they saw me doing this on the internet, would they be proud of me? Or would they, they may be a little bit ashamed of how I was acting. So that's how we protect ourselves online. We're strong, we make good choices, and we communicate with people in the real world. And you can take that back to your school environment. When you show people how they can use technology appropriately, you'll become a leader and people will follow. Thank you very much.